In this chapter, I'm going to start to work on the look dev of this character, and the first thing I'm going to do is exporting the textures. Before exporting texture, I'm going to show you how I set up the export. This is the Arnold standard export, and as you can see, it says $mesh, $texture set, base color, and so on for all the channels. So what does it mean? This is going to export one sequence of texture for each texture set. And this is okay, but I prefer to work in a different way. So I duplicate this export and I did my own. You can see that it's much simpler and more efficient, I believe. Basically saying $mesh, base color, and UDIM, and so on for all the channels. In this way, instead of exporting one sequence of texture for texture set, I export only one sequence of texture for the full asset. And it's something that is used a lot nowadays in production. As you can see, I already exported the textures, and for the whole backpack, I only have one sequence of texture, and so on for all the channels. And the same for Takeshi. Only one sequence. And this will allow me to create only one shader for the full asset. This is a much more efficient way of working, and is much lighter because instead of creating and loading a lot of shaders in the phase of rendering, you will have only one for the frog and only one for the backpack. So basically only two shaders for the full asset instead of many shaders. Now I'm going to export all the texture here. And you can see I'm going to choose the template. I'm going to choose EXR, 16-bit and 4K. And I'm ready to export. I'm back into Maya now, and I'm going to set up the light rig. I have a light rig that I already created, and I keep in a folder always available. It's basically a neutral environment with some light attached to it. Here I'm just renaming the layers and organizing the scene. I strongly recommend everybody to create rendering templates like this, because this is going to speed up your work quite a lot. It's a very repetitive task to create an environment and a light setup for rendering. So this is a really good setup, and I'm going to show you how I did it. This is the lighting setup that I used, and it's composed of a Skydome light, where I attached an HDRI, and this HDRI should be the same that you're using in Substance Painter. So in this way, what you're seeing in Substance Painter should be as close as possible to what you will be rendered after. Very important, when you load this HDRI, make sure that you are using this color space, SceneLinea Rec 09 sRGB. This will make sure that is color corrected properly. Then I have also some area lights here, and 4 cameras, 2 for the close-up, and 1 for the mid and 1 for the long shot. All this is parented to this curve, and this curve is keyed, so each 10 frames there is a position which I'm going to render, and you can see that everything is rotating, so the cameras are rotating and the lights are rotating. So in this way I keep the same relative lighting for the character for each angle. This is a pretty good setup, I believe, and I strongly recommend you to try to create your own setup and even different setups, so it will be really quick to judge and test your character under different lighting conditions. The first thing I'm going to do is test the displacement map. I'm adding subdivisions to the geometry first, and then starting to test the shader. So here I create an Arnold standard shader, and I create the displacement shader. I'm dragging and dropping the texture, making sure that it's in RAW and loaded with the UDIMs and connected to the displacement shader. And now I'm testing the displacement. Here, this is the first test on the displacement shader on the head, and it is looking pretty good. Very important to add the correct number of subdivisions to the object. They are going to get displaced. And you can calculate that by thinking how many times this was subdivided into ZBrush. Here's the second step. I'm basically adding some drops which were created in Substance Painter, and I exported a displacement map only for these drops. So I'm basically adding AI add node and adding these water drops on top of the displacement that we already have. In this way, I'm getting a much nicer and more complex displacement, say adding the water drops on top of the displacement that I already have. After that, I'm going to start to test the diffuse. Here I imported the diffuse, and I always attach a color correct node to it. I may do little adjustment later, and I'm going to connect to the shader and test it. Now I continue to build the shader. I duplicated the diffuse, and I'm going to input this into the SSS color. And I'm going to start to test this as well. Next texture I'm going to test is the scattering, which is basically coming from the thickness map with some adjustment in substance. And here I'm going to connect the red channel and also a color correction node, which could be useful for tweaking later on. And I'm going to insert this into the radius of the subsurface scattering. And this will help me to really tweak the SSS shader. Here you can see my basic setup for the skin. Basically, I have two diffuse maps with color correction, and one goes into the base color and the other goes into the SSS color. And then there is the scattering map, which goes into the scatter radius. Something to keep in mind is that when you duplicate texture nodes, for some reason they go to default again to sRGB, which is wrong. You really need to understand that the color maps need to be color corrected for ASYS CG. And all the other black and white maps, they have to be in RAW. And usually I only use the red channel for all the black and white maps. This is our first test of the skin, and is looking pretty good. In a bit I'm going to add more maps. Now I'm adding the roughness map. And I'm just doing some tweaking to the map. Here I can isolate the single maps. And I'm just checking how the roughness is working at the moment. I'm changing the gamma and see which kind of parameter are going to give me the good result that I'm looking for. It is my second test, and I'm quite happy with the result. I'm going to jump really soon to the next stage. Now I'm going to start to work on the eyes. I'm going to apply the same diffuse texture and color corrected. Make sure there is SSCG, duplicate it, and I'm going to input the second node into the SSS color and put in the weight at 1. Here's the first test, and is looking pretty good. I'm going to do some tweaking here. I'm going to saturate more the SSS and checking a few different options for the specular. I want to have a look really wet, and so the roughness will go really down to very small values. And I'm also giving a little bit of a bluish, almost a cyan sheen to get that interesting reflection in some angles. I'm basically playing with different settings, mostly on the coat and the sheen, to see if I can get some interesting reflection in these eyes. And I want a really sharp reflection, so the roughness is very close to 00 value, so 0.1001. I think I'm quite satisfied with this, and I'm going to jump to the next piece. Here I'm going to start to work on the shirt, and the first thing I'm going to do is to create a displacement node connecting the red channel, and I'm going to apply the subdivisions to the geometry. After that, I'm going to test the displacement. Here I'm starting to test the displacement. I'm checking before and after. And I'm going to add another displacement node. Here I'm creating an add node. So I put the first input to input 1 using always the red channel. And now I'm going to import the displacement from Substance Painter, which is added on top. I'm going to start to test it. Sometimes take a little while to load, because also need to convert the texture in TX files. And here is really strong. I'm going to start to tweak. I'm going to create a remap value, and I'm going to connect the remap value. Here I'm going to start to lower down the value. By the end I was not happy and I got rid of it. Now I'm going to add normals. I'm creating a AI normal node. I'm going to link into normal camera. And then I'm going to test again. In a bit we will see the result. Here I'm testing the normals and displacement together, and they are working pretty well. Now I'm going to add a few more maps. I'm going to add the color. I'm duplicating the network and pasting here. And attaching the diffuse color, and then duplicating the same nodes for the SSS shader. As I said before, be very mindful, because when you duplicate node, what happens is that the maps are going back to sRGB color space, and you need to really check and make sure that the color is in SSCG color space. Here I'm applying roughness, and the shader is pretty much there now. Now I'm going to apply the scattering and plug it always with a color correction node into the SSS radius. In this way I can control how much scattering there is in the different areas of the cloth, just by changing and remapping the black and white scatter map. And now I'm applying basically all this shader to all the clothing and all the pieces. So instead of creating one shader for the cloth, one for the pants, one for the bubbles, and so on, I'm just doing one shader for all these elements, and you can see that this is pretty fast to render. I added a few more objects to the same shader, and you can see that they're going to work extremely well, because all this look development in reality was done in Substance rather than in Arnold. So all the characteristics of the material are coming from good textures and we need to tweak really a minimum amount here in Arnold. Now I'm going to start to work on the backpack, and I created a big master material following the same steps for the whole backpack. Since we have exported one sequence of textures, just that one material will give us the result that we want. Here I'm applying the scattering, base color. You can see that the same material is applied to a lot of objects. Now I'm adding the character, and I just want to test the backpack on its own. I'm subdividing some of the pieces which require displacement, the fabric and the big basket, and I don't need to displace the other elements. This is my first render of the backpack, and I think it's working extremely well. I'm going to go around and check all the different parts, but I'm already quite happy with the result. Now I'm going to unhide the frog and see how do they look together. Here is the backpack with the frog, and I'm quite happy with the result where I'm right now. As always, I'm going to check on different angles to see how it looks. It's looking pretty good. Let's jump to the next step. Next, I'm going to add some AOVs, and this will be useful later on for compositing, but also to spot if there are problems in the render or the textures. So I'm going to add a normal AOV, Z depth and albedo, and a few more of them. I'm going to add an ID, which could be useful to separate the different objects in compositing, a specular direct, and an SSS. And now I'm going to start to check all these passes, which later I'm going to output as a multi-channel EXR. Here I'm checking the normal pass, the beauty, the ID, and the depth and the albedo, direct specular and SSS. All the AOVs are ready now, and I can jump to the next. Now I duplicated the head, and I merged together the eyes and the head in one piece. Then I made the object live, and I started to draw with the quad draw. I'm going to do this extra piece of geometry, which is called meniscus. Is this thin layer of water that is usually collected between the eye and the skin. So this is going to give a really nice feeling of wetness all around. After that, I'm just going to apply a completely transparent shader, sort of watery and reflective. It's a little addition, but believe me, it's going to give a lot of realism to the character. Here I just applied a sort of watery glass shader to the object, and you can see the before-after in the render. You can see really this little tiny reflection appearing and disappearing is giving me really that feeling of water between the eyes and the skin. These are the first test renders I did for this character. I'm pretty happy overall, and in the next chapters I'm going to do some little more tweaks to him, and then go to the final render and compositing in Photoshop. See you there.